Hello everyone, I've just finished reading chapter 30 of Darth Plagueis, so now I only have the epilogue to read. We got Plagueis rushing into the Senate, who is still in a bit of a panic that that Qui-Gon and the Jedi Council may accept Anakin for training, because he mentions that if Anakin's midichlorian concentrations are as high as Dooku said they are, then the Jedi will likely not allow him to go home and will probably train him. And while Sidious says, "You said high counts don't always equate to force talents," but Damask says that's not what concerns him. But anyway, as it turns out, Orm Fritar nominates Palpatine for the election. And Palpatine says, "Oh, you've done it, Darth Plagueis." And Plagueis is a bit cautious and he's still saying, "Not yet. I won't rest until I'm certain of a win." Anyway, he then goes and spies on Anakin and Qui-Gon, who in the Phantom Menace are having a conversation about what midichlorians are, and Plagueis is really wondering what are they talking about. And he receives multiple Force visions. He receives multiple visions from the Force of ferocious battles in deep space, a clashing of lightsabers out the partitions of radiant light, and a black-helmeted cyborg rising from the table. Once those visions end, Qui-Gon and Anakin are gone from Plagueis. Just gone. And Plagueis is desperately trying to figure out and make sense of the images, and he tries to repress the truth. And he knows that which would be the Force could change the course of history and defeat the Sith. But he wondered unless he could have Maul kill Qui-Gon and try and keep the boy from being trained. And in Plagueis' mind, Qui-Gon was the key to everything. But anyway, he had the day before the vote in the light, the day before the vote for the election, how Plagueis and Sidious had a bit moved in the final pieces of the plan, as they had not expected Amidala to be as staring as she was. As what had ended up happening was that, as we know in the film, she makes a reconciliation between the people of Naboo and the Gungans, and has been able to persuade the Gungans to assemble an army to fight back against the Trade Federation. And the last thing the Sith needed was to have Amidala be the hero and victor of the crisis, rather than it being Palpatine. So what they ended up having to do was having to get the Nemoidians to start the invasion early. They're really having to start the invasions early, and to try and defeat and try to plummet down the Republic a bit. And Plagueis didn't really take much, or didn't really give advice or contradict Palpatine's orders. He knew that the battle was, for at least the Trade Federation, lost, and that the boy wouldn't die. And he went to have a bit of a conversation with the leaders of the Commerce Guild, Techno Union, and the Corporate Alliance, and among others, to kind of get them to prepare. No, actually, no, not prepare. Pay attention to how the Republic and the Jedi Order deal with the Trade Federation. So they can see how the Trade Federation will be dismantled, and now the same will be done to them if they don't carefully withdraw from the Senate and take their clients with them. And Saint Pestage had made sure that Team and Antilles has no chance of being Chancellor, giving Palpatine that edge in the election. And so Palpatine and Plagueis go and attend the Opera House. That's Palpatine and Anakin attend in Revenge of the Sith, where ironically Palpatine talks about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis' demise. And Plagueis is still in a bit of unease, despite the multiple reassurances by Saint Pestage. He was unsure and wasn't able to relax, despite Saint Pestage reassuring him that Palpatine would become Chancellor. He just still continues to worry, as we know, he made a vow not to rest until their victory was guaranteed. Anyway, then they have a something that literally in the book lasts only three lines. It says, following the performance, he and Palpatine joined a select group of politicians that included Orn Fritar and Masamida for a late dinner in a private room in the Manari. And then they go back to Damask's flat in I can't remember the name of the building, but in a building that Plagueis owns completely. Plagueis gave the Sun Guards the night off. You know, they really, aside from that one scene where the Sun Guards rescue Palpatine in I think it was chapter 19, the Sun Guards really haven't done anything in the book except be there. They're very much like the Royal Guards, like Palpatine's Royal Guards out. They're just there rather than actually doing anything. At least the Sun Guard though, I know the Royal Guards, Palpatine's Royal Guards are really skilled, don't get me wrong, but I'm just being thrown into the movies, so do nothing, do they? So even the Sun Guards are kind of like the equivalent to that, but they at least get one scene where they do something. Anyway, Plagueis retired the Sun Guards, gave them the Sun Guards the night off, and pretty much just left him, Palpatine, and 114D in the room, who they toasted to the coming culmination of the grand plan, and how Palpatine will be elected as Chancellor. And Palpatine over and over again talks with Plagueis about the speech he's intending to do upon becoming Chancellor, and often bringing up Plagueis in that speech. Eventually Plagueis got quite drunk on the Sullustan wine. He and Palpatine went through 4 bottles of it. I assume Plagueis was the one who mostly went through it, because there's no mention of Palpatine getting intoxicated. It literally only mentions Plagueis being intoxicated. But Plagueis is eventually just wanting to go to sleep so he can dream about the victory they'll have. And Palpatine is still he's in a mix between doubt and confidence, wanting to make sure he gets his speech perfect. but Plagueis tells him to go back home, get a few hours rest, because he'll need at least that. And Palpatine says he wants to do the speech just one more time from the beginning, just one more time. And Plagueis is the beginning. And Palpatine says, Lord Plagueis, you said you wouldn't rest till our win was a matter of fact. And Plagueis goes, so it is, and so I shall, Darth Sidious. And then Sidious says, well, let us celebrate as well. Sidious says asks 114D to fill their glasses again. Eventually, though, and while Palpatine does the speech again, eventually Plagueis is eventually so intoxicated he just falls asleep. And in 20 years of never having to contend with Plagueis being in the state of sleep, his transpirator had to click repeatedly in adjustment, as it says in the book, as if it's in panic. And Palpatine halts his speech, looks at Plagueis, and as if he was making his mind up about something, and goes to leave. But he stops as the dark side speaks to him, and it says, your election assured, the sun guards absent, Plagueis unsuspecting and asleep. And Palpatine makes a move, and even in killing Plagueis, he's still being strategic. He doesn't aim to cripple Plagueis with Force Lightning, he aims to disable his transpirator with his Force Lightning. And he gives a long speech and he gives a long monologue, which is, I think the whole monologue is not just what the words of it's not just the words of the monologue that are mocking Plagueis. It is a fact, it is a monologue, because throughout the book, Plagueis, I would say one notable thing about Plagueis is his philosophical monologues, and this really does feel like it's mocking Plagueis. Palpatine is mocking Plagueis. And he talks about Plagueis' manipulations and his denials to Palpatine, how he denied him certain things, how he put Palpatine in his place, how he would scold Palpatine, how he turned away from the grand plan just to try and figure out immortality, and how he had the audacity to criticise Palpatine for putting in too much pride into Maul, which, to be fair, Palpatine did think, oh my master was right, I have made him prideful, but still. And how Plagueis attempted to turn his equally powerful apprentice into a messenger, a mere intermediary, and that it was Plagueis who watched him in secret while he tasked their true intermediary to reveal the reborn Sith to the galaxy. And he mocked him and continued to mock him, talking about how in his time he truly was wise, but he was too prideful and blind to realise the Rule of Two has not yet ended, and that his view was not yet, and how his view never was, how what he thought he supersede, and Plagueis wanted to rule with an apprentice, and how he thought that was what had already come when he made Palpatine his apprentice, and he hasn't realised that Palpatine had intentions to continue the Rule of Two, to make himself his master, to make himself the leader of the Sith. There we go. I'm getting tangled up in my words. And how Plagueis have forged the most powerful Sith the galaxy has ever known, but in doing so have forgotten to leave a place for himself. How Plagueis' pride never allowed him to question they would no longer be needed. And he asks how Palpatine asks whatever made him think Palpatine would ever need him after he got to this point. After he got to this point, what made Plagueis ever think he would need him? And we get to see how he often said that the old order of Bane had ended with the death of Tenebrous, and that an apprentice doesn't need to be stronger anymore, just more clever, and that the era of keeping score, suspicion and betrayal was over, and that strength was not in the flesh but in the Force. And Palpatine says that he lost the game the very first day he chose to train him to rule by his side, which honestly, if you remember earlier in the book, Palpatine, he explicitly told Plagueis he wanted to rule. In the most explicit and clear terms possible, he made it clear to Plagueis he didn't want to be a subordinate. He wanted to rule or nothing. And if you couldn't have that, then you wanted nothing. So Plagueis' pride really was getting ahead of him, wasn't it? Anyway, he starts to then choke Plagueis, really making sure Plagueis dies, and makes it seem like he died of a transpirator failure. And he makes it clear to him that this is what the ones he experimented on failed, and that he could save Plagueis, how he could bring him back from the brink of death as Plagueis did to Venomous, how he could heal his body to heal the damage done to his lungs, his heart and his brain. But he's not going to do no such thing. And Palpatine makes it clear. If he's probably wondering, when did he change? And Palpatine makes it clear he never did change, and that as they clouded the minds of the Jedi, he clouded Plagueis' mind, and that he never once had intentions of sharing power with Plagueis. He just needed to learn from him, to learn all of his secrets that he trusted he would eventually reveal. And again, Palpatine makes it clear that, but what made Plagueis think he would ever need him after that? Vanity, his sense of self-importance, and that he says, "You've been nothing more than a pawn in a game played by a genuine master, the Sithari." And he tells Plagueis to reflect back on even the past few years, how Yinkor, Javala, the Eriadu, Maul, the Nemoidians, Naboo, an army of clones, the fallen Jedi Dooku. He says, "You think that these were your ideas, but when in fact they were mine, cleverly suggested to you, so that you could feed them back to me. You were far too trusting, Plagueis. No Sith can really ever truly care about one another. This has always been known. There is no way but my way." And Palpatine makes it clear that gives Plagueis a few final words, letting him know that he could have let him die in the Fobosi district, but he couldn't allow that when so many powers just remained out of his reach. And it turns out he acted wisely. He thought he would die on Sujan, and he thought he would die on Sujan, but Jabba had told him that the attack was coming, and that also turned out to be for the best, because even after all Plagueis had taught Palpatine, he might not have been able to make the final steps to the Chancellorship without his help in manipulating the Senate. And Palpatine says, "If it's any comfort to you, I could have never succeeded without you." But now that he's won the race, he has no need for Plagueis and as a co-chancellor, and he makes it clear that his presence and his unnecessary counsel would only make matters more confusing, and that he has more to do what the risk of discovery might not allow him to do. While he executes the rest of the grand plan, growing an army, creating rebellion, and making intergalactic war, and eventually resulting with the defeat of the Jedi and the reformation of the Republic. And he says to Plagueis to rest easy, and that he will be proclaimed Emperor. The Sith will have revenge, and Palpatine will rule the galaxy. And Plagueis slides onto the floor, rolls face down, and dies. And Palpatine makes it clear to 114D that he's going to have to find him a new home and a new body. And he goes to the window, looks to regards the murder scene, and he looks back, and despite the moment of triumph, he felt something, as it's described in the book, shading his sense of triumph. And he won something that was a vague awareness of a power greater than himself, and he wonders, was it Plagueis reaching out from the far side of death to annoy him, or was the feeling just a mere consequence of his rise to power? And that's when we move into the epilogue, which I'm going to read in a bit. But I've only got 6 more pages in the book to go before I am done. I really have enjoyed Plagueis. I want to make it clear, I really have enjoyed it. I'm still going to do a review on the epilogues, so keep in mind that. But I have enjoyed Plagueis. It is a good book. I definitely want to rewatch Phantom Menace so I can kind of click things fully into place. And I would definitely suggest it. It's not a book for all. I want to make it very clear. Darth Plagueis is not a book everyone's going to enjoy. And it's definitely not a book for kids. It's very complicated. But and there are times of gore in there. But it is, in my opinion, it is a very good book, and I can see why so many people said the book was one of, if not the best, Star Wars novels ever written. It has been a really good book, and I really have enjoyed Plagueis as a character. I think he's made his way to be my second favourite Star Wars character. But for what will be the penultimate time for this, thank you for watching my review of Darth Plagueis, and I will see you all next time in the epilogue review. Bye.